Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Animal Issues Committee meeting. It's April 4th, 2023. It's a nice spring day outside. Welcome to everybody here. First thing we'll do is a roll call. Bob Harrison.
Here.
Cheryl Crow. She may be running a little late. Deb Ward is traveling. Marcia Maldies.
Here.
Terry Smith.
Here.
Melissa Riesco.
Here.
So we have a quorum so we can conduct business today. We had received a couple of pieces of correspondence, one of them from Deb Ward related to some of the issues around the dog run and dog jurisdictions in Dewey Beach, which are embedded in the agenda. And then we also have a letter from a resident, Dave Devendorf, about time for dogs on the boardwalk and on the beach, which we'll discuss under new business. There are no minutes for our approval this week. The first thing we have is, I'll just explain a little bit from what transpired at the Board of Commissioners meeting. I had brought up our issues of the three things we wanted to do, which were the flyer, to let people know about dogs, leaving dogs unattended in hot cars in the summer, as well as children, and then updating our phone contact list for the front desk so that people were calling proper authorities in case animals were in distress or they needed to go to a 24-hour animal hospital, whatever. So that phone list has been updated and it's at the front desk with City Hall. It's also available online, which Lynn will tell us about. And the second issue were the dog waste or the dog poop stations, which was discussed by the commissioners as well. And we'll discuss that as the second order of old business. And then new business will be related to the dog run, as well as times of dogs on the boardwalk and or the beach. So as we get started, Lynn, if you'd like to share with us what we discussed. Thank you. This is Lynn Cohn from our communications department here in the city. And she and I spoke after our meeting last time to put together from the draft that was done, a flyer, and she'll explain it to us.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Again, I'm Lynn Cohen. I'm the communications manager for the city. And I met with Commissioner Bennett to discuss several of the messages that the committee wished to share with visitors and residents related to animals. And I think the challenge is that kind of lecturing people doesn't really work well in terms of communication and behavior modification. So try to do something a little more graphically interesting to get the messages across. And so we talked about a flyer and the various ways that it could possibly be distributed. And what I've shared with you is a draft of a flyer that I propose to include in the Chamber of Commerce's Realtor and Accommodation bags for the month of July. So July is the most popular month. They do about 3,500 bags that month, and at a cost of $350 plus the printing cost, we could include the flyer in all 4 weeks in July, and felt like that was a hopefully effective way to get the message to visitors, and we can see if we notice any change in behavior or interest. So these were some of the messages that Commissioner Bennett and I discussed. I've included them on the flyer. And then—
Maybe a quick sec. Is there a way we could project that if we have one? Okay. Just so that—
I don't know how to work this.
I don't either. So, but there it is.
We also discussed other ways to get out the messaging, and so we have scheduled the hot car messaging to run on our marquee from May 15 to September 3, and Joe with the IT department is helping me with that. We also can use pieces from the flyer in lines in the sand periodically throughout the season, and also as social media messages.
So did you say this, the chamber, I had interrupted you, so is the chamber going to put these in their rental packets?
I'm going to fill out the order form
Okay.
today, tomorrow, if it meets your approval and is
Okay.
the direction you want to go.
Thank you.
And then also, as Commissioner Bennett mentioned, we updated the visitors, the animals on the beach and boardwalk page on the website. We added some new information links, and we checked on the links that were there and updated them if necessary. And that information has been shared with our City Hall front desk clerks, who can provide that information to visitors or if they get phone calls. So if you have any questions or feedback, happy to.
So the QR code, when somebody
Yes.
clicks on that, where does that
It
take
will
them?
take them to the animals on the beach and boardwalk page of the website.
And that has the directory as well?
That is where the directory is, yes.
Okay. Great. Now, I know, Melissa, you had talked to Rehoboth Beach Main Street about getting this message out to the businesses. Do you have any comment on that, or?
Oh, sure, Tim, I don't mind. So I did talk to Rehoboth Beach Main Street, and they would be glad to include a small article in one of their monthly newsletters to encourage businesses, if they would like, to put this poster or a poster in their window, so that, when people are coming in, they might see this and say, oh, I left my dog in the car, or, I saw a dog in a car. They also said that, if we wanted to print posters, they would recommend about 50. And I think one of the questions we had was, would they help us distribute the posters? And the answer is, they would, but they would prefer to have the article in their newsletter and encourage businesses to let us know or somebody know that they want a poster, rather than physically having somebody from Main Street go around to every business. I think that would be something that this committee would have to do if we wanted to do that. And of course, I'd be glad to walk around, but that's kind of what, in a nutshell, Main Street said.
Right, yeah, because I agree with, I think their summation was they weren't sure everybody we'd print up all these posters and they might not get used. So
Exactly.
maybe we electronically send this to them and they can do the newsletter and use social media for it as well.
Sure.
Are there any additional comments or things people think we should include or delete on this?
I think the poster's really cute.
It looks good.
It's
Thank
nice and
you.
bright and catchy. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like me to send it to you electronically to send to Main Street, or would you like me to send it to Main Street?
You can send it. I mean,
Okay.
since you're probably the best point of contact for them anyway.
Okay.
But if you need something from me, I'm glad to assist or do whatever's needed.
And so, and then on the electronic billboard that's out front, so you said the messages will run kind of from May through September?
I have it scheduled right now for the entire period of May through
Okay.
through Labor Day.
Okay, great, thank you. I think that'll be a big help. Any members, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, I like that QR code on there.
Good. Yeah, there. Comes in handy.
Any members of the public have any comments? Please come forward and state your name and where you live.
Yes, Frank Cooper, 96 East Lake Drive. I had a question about the poop happens when it does, please pick up. Does that really make it implicit that it's a rule as opposed to a suggestion? I don't want it to be unfriendly, and I'm sure that was the point, and I'm sure the Director of Communications is better than I am at this, but somehow it just...
Want to take please out?
Well, no. Please comply with the rule, or, I wouldn't take the please out. I would just somehow suggest that it's more than a suggestion. So,
Do you think we should add, because there is a fine if you don't pick up after your dog, but whether we enforce it or not, issue
Yeah,
we will
it's
discuss
tricky
later.
language, and I'm the worst at that, as you know. One of you, I'm sure, is better, but when I read it, it just seems like, oh, this is a nice suggestion that you pick up, but does it really convey to people who live in many areas where this isn't a rule? There are no rules like this, so they're not familiar with that urban thing of having to pick up behind your dog. And since our audience here is from all over the place, I think it would just be helpful if it was
I think
implied
that's a
that
good,
it really
that's
is
a
a
good point.
rule.
I think it's a good point.
Might I suggest then that instead of dog period, we put dog comma, as it is our law?
That's what I was thinking. Please comply with our local laws.
Or just a sentence afterward, and a third line, it's the law?
I think that's good.
Lou?
I'll add that.
Carolyn Diefendorfer, city resident. I believe it's a state law, actually. Not just a city rule, but I think it's a state law that if you don't pick up after your dog, you can be fined.
Why don't we check that then, and we'll get
I
some.
don't think that makes a difference. We have people coming from Maryland, Pennsylvania, New York, whatever. So just say, it is the law.
I agree with you. I think most states have laws on this, or cities or municipalities, so it's the law kind of covers the whole gamut.
Right. Just,
Do you have that, Lynn?
I do.
We'll figure that out, okay. Does anyone have any other comments regarding the flyer? No? Do you have anything else?
I do not.
Oh. Thank you very much, Lynn. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our second order of old business was the discussion about poop bag dispensers or dog waste dispensers around the city. And we initially talked here in the committee that we thought we should start out around the parks, that they would be near where the current refuse removal is, so that it wasn't an extra stop for city staff to pick up the garbage. We were not going to include a separate waste basket. They could be thrown in the regular trash bins. And what the mayor has done is, as we discussed it, we decided to turn it over to the city manager and staff, and they will present to us, to the board, maybe as soon as this week's, or this workshop, but not sure. But in the city manager's report, will give us an update as to what the cost would be and where we could locate them. And, but we were going to rely on the city to let us know where the best places would be to relocate those. There was some discussion, if some of you watched the Beach and Boardwalk Committee meeting, that they did not necessarily want them near the boardwalk. So, but we'll wait to see what the city staff recommends, and then that we'll go from there and make our decision, or discuss it then when the city staff comes with their recommendations. Any questions about the dog dispensers, dog bag dispensers? Did they say why they don't want them near the boardwalk? You please come up with, and tell us your name and where you live.
Hi, Liza Hodgkins. I'm actually the Forgotten Mile. I have a beach rental, Rehoboth Beach Paradise, because it's dog friendly. So we have a lot of people who come up to Rehoboth, and of course I do with my dogs. So that's why I'm interested in this. Yes, did they say why they didn't want it on the boardwalk or near the boardwalk?
You know, it was simply because dogs aren't allowed on the boardwalk during the summer season. And if we put poop bags there, it's kind of sending a mixed message. So, and if we did, I had spoken to Jay, he and I had gone back and forth. There was some talk that if we did, or if the initial release of the bags around the parks worked, if we did do something around the boardwalk, it'd probably be on the west side, so that it would stay versus the east side, right on the ocean side, it would be on the west side of the boardwalk. Not at every entrance, but maybe, scattered throughout. But again, we were going to rely on the city staff based upon what their route is to tell us where they best be. So that was actually a good thing we did as a committee, I think, to, if it goes through. I don't think they'll be that expensive. I know Deb is not here. She had done some research in Dewey, which is embedded in the agenda, of the cost of some dispensers. But again, the city manager has tasked city staff to come up with actual costs for us and what it would entail. So when that happens, then we'll bring it back to committee and discuss. Any other comments regarding the waste removal stations? No? The new business, did anyone on the committee watch the Beach and Boardwalk Committee?
Some of it.
Okay. So we'll that'd be part of the part of our new business discussion. So we received a letter from resident Dave Diefendorf regarding the times for dogs to be on the beach as well as on the boardwalk. And that created a discussion within the Board of Commissioners, but it just was a discussion because we hadn't had it as an official agenda item. But currently, dogs are not allowed on the beach, are not allowed on the boardwalk or beach from May 1st through September 30th, and leashed dogs are permitted from October 1st through April 30th. So the recommendation or the consideration would be to have it match with our parking season and have everything actually match with the parking season and with our full season in general, which is really what the Beach and Boardwalk Committee had discussed, to put everything in a uniform time. So that right now parking is May 15th through September 15th, and bikes would be the same and dogs would be the same. And so I would suggest that if we agree, that we agree with what the Beach and Boardwalk Committee will be recommending as well, to make sure that we're all on the same schedule rather than having everybody guess when are bikes allowed, when are dogs allowed, when's parking seasons start. So the first thing would be the, I'm trying to think of the right word. I guess a consensus on the dates, putting all the dates, it's aligning the dates. Thank you. Any discussion on that?
I have one point. I cannot find anywhere where we clarified that we have to have a 6-foot lead. And retractables are terrible. People with their retractables and people on bicycles, it just doesn't work. Even a 6-foot lead's a problem, and enforcement. Because people just come up, let their dogs loose. We had problems because we had a dog that was not dog-friendly, and people would say, oh, my dog's friendly. I said, well, mine's not. So I'm trying to control my dog trying to fight and their dog trying to be friendly. If they're on a lead, then it's not a problem. So we need better enforcement and a rule on a lead.
I've not seen anything in terms of lead either. So was there something written in the ordinance about?
I think if I recall correctly, and it wasn't less than a year ago, when we had gone through the process of looking at language for a leash law and a tethering law, or just language to go in the code regarding tethering, I think that's where we identified, and I don't know the language exactly off the top of my head, but it's my understanding that we did not necessarily use that language repetitively in code because of the enforceability of it, and just considering that most of our seasonal officers and even police are not carrying around something to be able to measure that with.
Well,
I may be confusing.
It's obvious if it's a retractable.
Sure. Oh, yeah, absolutely. That aside, the length of it, and pardon me, because I may be getting that kind of intertwined with state law.
Well, the Cape Henlopen State Park, 6-foot leash all animals, and they patrol. Of course, what they do when the dogs are let loose, I don't know. A lot of the fishermen, fisherwomen, have their dogs loose.
I mean, enforcement's a challenge regardless of what we're
Yeah.
here talking about.
Right, and that was the discussion overall, not just simply with dogs, but in the beach and boardwalk, was a discussion of enforcement. And there's already Delaware state law and our law is that dogs must be on leashes at all times. And currently, people are letting their dogs loose on the beach in the morning, which is not enforced. And so one of the issues that we came up with, or that had been brought up at the Board of Commissioners meeting, was if we're not enforcing our current laws, why would we loosen them? Let's enforce what we have, and then we can decide whether we're going to do some additional whether we would allow a dog run where we would have to where we'd allow dogs off leash. So for instance, a municipality, Dewey, has actually designated a specific area where dogs could run loose, and they have an enforcement person full-time that's actually there enforcing it. You have to get a permit, even if you're just there for a day, and you need to have a tag on the dog. We just do not enforce it here. As many of you know, on the beach, people's dogs are running loose without their leashes. And so first we would have to decide how we're going to enforce it if we do something. What's the designated area going to be? How's it going to be enforced? And then we'd have to let, the municipality would have to go over the state law to say we designate this particular area for dog run. So it's a little more complicated than us just saying, let's carve out a piece at the beach to have the dogs run. So I don't know if there's any, Terry?
We didn't finish the part about the seasonality. You brought that point up about,
May 15th, September.
right.
Oh, okay.
So if you listen to that meeting, one of the people in that meeting was actually made a point to extend the parking season for parking meters. And to make it, that would compress the time that dogs were allowed. If you follow me. By making the parking season longer is what they suggested, which I don't think sends a real good message. You know, that affects the local workers by extending that parking meter season. And in effect, it helps maybe what their vision is. What was said was to raise more money for the city, which I don't think that's really what I can tell so far is what these committees are for. Is there's a finance committee for that. So I'm for it if they keep this current, but don't try to extend it. Because I know the parking meters, the permitted parking's different, like down on the south side of Rehoboth. If you park at night, that's even on a different schedule than the parking with permits and the meters. So there's like 3 different things that are askew. So if they all got lined up and coincided with the dogs, I would totally be for that.
Yeah, there's a traffic study that's just starting that will take place this season that will hopefully give a recommendation to put everything in a bit more order, because you're right, there's starts, stops, some things with permits that you can get differently than if you were a resident versus if you came here for a week. And so there's a number of different parking issues which are related to that. But I did listen to that as well, and they said the thought was let's put everything on a season. And so whether we moved it up to match the dogs or the dogs came in to match the bikes,
Well, there was also
I think,
talk of extending the parking.
right,
paid
but
parking
that's
on the avenue.
right. But we're not going to do that until after this traffic study. Because we changed parking last year. If you remember, we went from May 15th to September 15th. Because we had that convoluted the first Monday after the second Sunday of the third Friday of it, So we had come up with a very simple May 15th, September 15th. I, for one, was recommending we go through October, and that had very little traction. So I think to try to extend parking now is just not, that's not our purview. Plus, it's not going to happen. But if we agree or we think we agree with the recommendation of the Beach and Boardwalk Committee to have the dogs allowed on the boardwalk as our correspondence said, from May 15th through September 15th. And I'll go back and make mention to that to the Board of Commissioners. Do we agree with that?
Yeah.
Everybody?
Yes.
I would.
Taking a vote?
We could.
Oh, I'm just,
Would,
again, we need to enforce things, and we need a 6-foot leash law, which is not on our books. I know, but you're letting dogs on the boardwalk, right? So,
no, this is just the,
times are fine if.
this is just
if
the
they're
times.
enforced,
Well, that's everything in the city.
right?
You know, that's the issue. We do a horrible job with enforcement. I'll be the first to
I don't
say
think our
it.
police officers in the wintertime ever walk the boardwalk or up on the boardwalk, you know, just walk up a street end and look each way and then go back to their
Right.
car.
I think based upon the Beach and Boardwalk Committee meeting and what we've brought up, I think the Rehoboth Beach Homeowners Association has also been quite critical of enforcement. So it's on the radar. So, but in terms of this particular thing of seasonality of May 15th or September 15th, if somebody would like to make a motion for that, we can vote on it.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
So the motion would be to allow,
Just can have them all concurrent.
okay,
To allow dogs on the boardwalk between, until 15 May and after 15 September.
that would be it. So that'd be the motion, and
You can say it.
It was said.
I will make the motion then. Do you want to second it?
I'll second it.
okay. So we have a motion to correspond with our parking permits of allowing dogs on the boardwalk from May 15th through September 15th versus current time, which is May 1st through September 30th. So we'll take a vote on that. Marcia?
Aye.
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Cheryl? Bob?
Aye.
Aye. So it's, and I vote aye, so it's unanimous. So we'll make that recommendation at the next workshop or Board of Commissioners meeting under the topic there.
Tim, did we decide on the 10 a.m.?
No,
We didn't.
that'd be
We're
next.
just gonna pass it. Okay.
I probably should have asked, were there any public comment regarding the times from May 15th through September 15th? No? Thank you. The other part of the correspondence was to allow dogs until 10 o'clock or 10 a.m. on the boardwalk during the summer months, as bikes are, as long as they are on leashes at all times. Does anyone have any comment related to that?
Enid.
Hi, Enid LaGree from Prospect. It's a particularly poor idea. I don't know how many of you have been on the hike, the bike path between here and Lewis. But if you have, and you've seen dogs stringing out in front of bicycles and kids going around and the whole thing, and the boardwalk is I don't know how wide it is. Are we 15 feet wide? I'm not sure, but there is no room. If anybody has been on the boardwalk in the summertime, when the bikes are bad enough. Now that we often see those electric bikes, it's even worse because they're going at top speed, and some of the bikers go really fast. And to have a dog dart out in front, you are going to have crashes and wrecks. I think it's a really poor idea. Certainly not safe and worthy of a little thought before you go in that direction.
Hi, so I'd like to be on the other side. It'd be interesting to find out how many problems there are up till 9:30 or whatever the time is that they're allowed now. I think the 6-foot idea is an excellent one, and it's pretty common. I've come here since I was, well, over 60 years. And I've been on the boardwalk and biked on the boardwalk and all. And yes, there are definitely some dog owners who are careless or just, I don't know, in love with the bay, the water, and just not thinking real life. So I think definitely with some restrictions, but I say if you haven't really had the problems beforehand, to please add them a little longer. But I bike as well, and so I can see both sides. But there are people who aren't paying attention either way, bike owners, walkers, dog owners.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Diefendorfer, city resident. I would like to thank you guys for taking up this this subject. And I was obviously the one that wrote I wrote an email to Tim. I'm good with the 15 to line up with the parking is a great idea. I get another month to take the dog on the boardwalk. I respectfully disagree that it's a poor idea. I've been on the boardwalk since I was for 60 years now. I've been walking that boardwalk. And people and dogs and bikes can get along as long as everyone controls themselves. So the bikes can be just as bad as the dogs. So just like she mentioned, if you control the bike, you're discriminated against the dogs. But I'm okay with that. I mean, it's crowded in the summertime. I'm okay with that. But it's nice that you took the opportunity to extend it. But I would suggest that you could think about a way of making it happen all summer long until 10 o'clock. It's not too, most dog owners are up there early. We walk at 8 o'clock in the morning, and even in the summertime, there's people on the boardwalk, but I think you could get away with it. But thank you for agreeing to extend the time.
Frank.
Yes, Frank Cooper, 96 East Lake Drive. I think the boardwalk is going to get increasingly busy as the number of people building houses and condominiums and developments. And to me, it's already kind of chaotic. And I wouldn't have any problem with it if we had a means of effective enforcement. But as you've kind of all said, we don't have effective enforcement now. So I think it's just exacerbating a problem that's not only going to be immediate, but it's going to grow in the future. So I don't think liberalizing this until we get our heads wrapped around some enforcement policy that's effective is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion here?
Just reflecting on those thoughts, you know, I do think as a committee, it's probably too early for us to make a real decision on whether or not to consider changing that time frame. However, since some of our conversation has shifted over to looking at what other areas are doing, specifically Dewey Beach, you know, they are implementing and have implementing a permit process. And I think if you know, the biggest opposition and the biggest complaint about allowing dogs on the boardwalk earlier and for a longer period of time is the instance of bad owners, and I say that obviously respectively to this situation where we've got folks that are here for vacation or you know, certain periods of time with no skin in the game, especially if it's not being enforced. So I think before we make any consideration to open up that time frame to allow that to happen, I think we need to look at the perspective of, is this a permit-based process? You know, let's look at enforcement. What improvements can we make going in so that it's not stepping forward and then stepping back again? So I would just make the recommendation that we maybe scale back on the consideration of that time period for this very minute, and make sure that we're doing our research and also communicating with city police department to understand the implications and make sure that if we do make a recommendation that it's solidly backed. If that makes sense.
I would like to point out, Dewey does not have a boardwalk.
Correct.
It is all beach. And this is only asking for dogs on the boardwalk. It's not saying the beach. And I think a lot of people come here to walk before 10 o'clock because they don't have to pay meters.
Sure.
So if we take a vote, I'm going to be against it.
At this point, it's a moot point anyway, because dogs are not allowed during the summer in any case.
Well, this is, will they be allowed? do we vote to allow them, put that before the commissioners and
That
see?
means we're going to have to go on a 12-month allowance for dogs to be on
Yes.
the boardwalk. I can't imagine ever getting that through the commissioners.
Or me.
I've got a little input. Thanks everybody for showing up. I listened to the meeting from the beach and boardwalks, and I tried to take everyone's point of view. I've got my own, everybody's got their own point of view. I grew up in this town, so I've seen all these changes that have happened. First and foremost, I live in the city. I've got a trust I'm a trustee of that's in the city. And who are we supposed to represent on this board? Well, we're working for a commissioner. Right on the city's website, this is the mission statement. The Rehoboth Beach Commission's mission is to provide the best service possible to the citizens of Rehoboth Beach at the least cost and in the most efficient and professional manner. I feel like a lot of what I've heard in the background has to do with the tourists that come here. And while I think that's the hub of a lot of people's livelihood and what have you, the citizens that live in Rehoboth, if they're saying they want to go on the boardwalk or on the beach, then we need to listen to the citizens. And I think some of the things that I listen to, and I've tried to switch, cognitive behavior therapy, take the pros and cons of each side. Everybody's got to meet in a certain middle, and it may not be right in the middle. But what if allowing dogs on the boardwalk on a leash is from sunrise till 8:30? Most dog walkers, I see a lot of the people in this room walking their dogs in the morning on the boardwalk, on the streets. The streets are full of dogs right now, right? So the part on the beach, Deauville, no boardwalk to deal with. Enforcement, put a sign up, sell tags. You can self-report. You know what? Maybe there's a reward for people to get busted. I don't know if the city allows that, but that sure will keep people on their toes. And I've heard all this talk about enforcement that's not there, and from what I understand, the city doesn't even have a full police force this year. So enforcement's gonna be an issue. But, my mother lives down on South Rehoboth, and I see it's crazy watching these people taking their dogs to Poodle Beach. How do we enforce it? Well, maybe you put a big sign on the drive-on on Prospect Street that says this is not a rampway for dogs. This is not a dog beach. There's your message right in front of them. You will be fined, what have you. I try to shift them down to Deauville where they're away from the beach. And they're using people's beaches that are friends of mine, and they own to the high water mark. They could put the kibosh on that like that if they wanted to. So this is something to think about. Maybe we don't ask for everything in the world. We just try to sunrise till 8:30, just get something going, see how it goes. If it doesn't work out, we change it. So I'm just giving my point of view, and it's just mine, so.
Enid?
I was very impressed. I missed the last meeting, but the meeting before with Terry suggested Deauville Beach. I live on the corner of Prospect. I don't think most people who do not live down there have any clue about dogs on the beaches. And I have dogs. I'm in the sport of dogs for 50 years. I've always had dogs. But we are overwhelmed. And the cars come all morning long, and the kids, because people are coming off the boardwalk, the children, and loose dogs. I have actually had dogs in my garage. I walk out, and the dog is in my, there's the dog, my dogs are here. I mean, it's outrageous, and there is no enforcement. Terry is correct. If they at least had if they just would put a police officer there for the first month to give us some help, because there is actually a website that suggests that Poodle Beach is the dog beach. And
Right.
It's not Poodle Beach anymore. It's St. Lawrence. They're everywhere. They come on our street or they come down St. Lawrence, and then they expand in both directions, not just down to Dewey, as they say they're going to do. Deauville is such a good idea because it is easily enforced. You've got a locale, wonderful parking. You've got porta potties. You could easily check for dog tags and licenses, which you can't do where we are. I mean, it's hopeless. At 5 o'clock in the morning, they're there. They're there, and they're there all day, too. They don't all just go home at 10 o'clock. We see dogs walking to the beach all day long. There are residents in this town whose dogs are off leash every single time they go by our house. And if you say anything, the language is horrible. And these are residents. These aren't just strangers, you know, tourists or what have you. These are people who know better. But they don't need to follow their rules and regulations because they're locals, as they say. Well, when you've got as many dogs coming and going as we've got on our end of town, Deauville is a great idea because then it would give the officers something to say. This is not a dog beach, but we do have a dog beach, and it's at Deauville. And you can drive your car there, and you can park, and we won't have this constant, oh my goodness, comings and goings all morning long. At any rate, that's my 2 cents. I really believe Deauville is an answer for many of the dog problems.
Frank?
Frank Cooper, I want to second what Enid said. I don't think people really understand the chaos that is in front of my house. I mean, literally. I put a little wall of roses in my yard. I counted 65 dogs peeing in my front yard in one Saturday. 65. Think about that, okay? It was literally 2 and 3 at a time sometimes. Utter chaos. Yard was dead, you know? I mean, I was unprepared for this when I moved down there. I knew you moved to the beach block, there were gonna be a lot of people, there's gonna be misbehavior, there's gonna be a certain amount of whatever. But this I was unprepared for, and it's increased. I mean, the fact that social media and stuff, people say, where can we take our dogs? They tell them Prospect Street at the end of Rehoboth Beach. So now everybody in this county, and I keep expressing, I can't express enough the fact that this is a growing metropolis area and that these people are increasing in numbers. The traffic is people honking at each other, you know, fighting over parking spaces. They open their doors, 3 and 4 dogs at a time get out, run around. I came home one day, there was a woman washing her dog off with my hose in my driveway. This is a whole new sense of entitlement. And when I challenged her about it, she says, I'm not done yet. Profanity ensued, but literally, I mean, I've 3 meetings with Chief Banks on this item. And he complained that they didn't have the staff and blah, blah, blah. And then they turned it over, supposedly they turned the authority over to the lifeguards to enforce it. And that's a real joke. I mean, the lifeguards are not there to police animal issues. And plus the abuse that you get if you say anything is just incredible. And it's sad because probably the majority of people are responsible and whatnot, you know, but it doesn't take that many irresponsible owners to make life miserable for people. So it's always the lowest common denominator when you're making rules and stuff. It's the people who misbehave that infringe upon the rights of those who do behave, which is a shame. But on the other hand, if you were in our position, I think you would understand this is chaos. And Terry's idea about an organized place that has parking and is away from people's homes and whatnot is probably a good idea. Now, I don't know what the people up in that area would think of it, you know, in the Pines, but I think that Deauville Beach has a parking lot for one thing. So if at that time of day there is the chaos that we, you know, experience in an area that's confined and that people have the expectation of that. Everyone does. Everybody knows that if you don't like dogs, stay away from this area. And that we don't have that choice. This is our neighborhood. And so I think it's a great idea, and I would support it. Thank you very much.
One of the topics that came up about Deauville was how do you mark it off?
How do you mark off Prospect? Excuse me.
No, we don't, right? So how will we mark it off to
Put a map on both walkways that go into Deauville. There's 2 entrances. You could show a map and say you've got 50 yards to the left of the north entrance and 50 yards to the right of the south entrance.
Frank?
I don't think that that's at the heart. I've been trying to get the city to do that at the Sussex County, the no man's land at the end of this. There is no, everybody has a different idea about where the city ends. Some people, it's right at Prospect Street, so they put up big tents and break all the rules there and drink and whatnot. And then the reality is it's quite a bit further down, but there's no demarcation at all. And I don't think it would take that much just to put a sign up, maybe one at the fence line and one down closer to the beach to kind of give a general idea of where that is. I don't really think that's a huge challenge. I don't think you have to fence it off or anything. I think you just make people aware of where the line is in some way. So, thank you.
But I think that goes back to the issue of enforcement. And we're not enforcing what we currently have. So if all of a sudden we say, oh, Deauville Beach is now the place to go, is that going to stop people going to Prospect? Is that going to stop? No, so, so the bigger issue, which the beach and Boardwalk, when I talked to Jay, he said, I'm not against an area on the beach that we can define as a place for us to take dogs, but we have to figure out how we're going to enforce it. And that seems to be the bigger issue, is that we can find a place, or hopefully we could come to some sort of decision amongst our committee, their committee, the city, and locate a place, but how are we going to enforce it? And that seems to be the issue. Now, Dewey has a full-time person that goes around. They have a little gator. They're checking all the dogs. You buy your permit right there if you don't have one. So we just don't have that enforcement yet, or we don't have it.
Well, that's why I think Terry's idea is such a good one, because I think that's easy.
Yep. You got to come up.
Yeah, I think Terry's idea of DeVille Beach makes that enforcement easier. For one thing, the parking is a huge issue. I mean, it's not just the dogs, it's the stream of SUVs full of dogs. And the other is that that's kind of, if it is defined by the city law, as opposed to this, the rules right now say that it's not legal. Social media says it is. This is common knowledge. It's like, oh, it's okay here. If you made it clear to people where it was and where it wasn't with signage, like Terry said, that I think that would be, you might not have such a huge enforcement issue if it was really defined as to what was legal and what wasn't and communicated to people. I think most people follow the rules. And it'd be better than what we have now, which is just, is mass scofflaw.
Yeah, I think the fear is that we already have, it's already out of control. And if before we add another location, we need to figure out how to stop what's currently happening and enforce it. So,
Right, it comes down to messaging.
Right.
And that's where we're not, we haven't in the past, and before we make a decision to do anything that's a major change, I think it really takes the development of the messaging that's effective for our residents and our visitors. That doesn't necessarily give a no, not here, but is more of an educational component, right? Mm-hmm.
That's what I was thinking. At the end of Prospect, this is not a dog beach. But, however, we have one on the other side of town.
but it sounds like from what these guys are going through, is a sign going to help the woman that decided to use your hose? I don't think so. If she's using your hose, she's not reading a sign.
All right, Carolyn Diefendorfer, city resident. People go to Prospect because there's this belief that it's okay. So you have to start with signs, in my opinion. People come into town, somebody will say, where can we go? And somebody will say to them, go down to the end of the boardwalk and then just get over past that first house and you're outside of Rehoboth. That's the belief. So you got to put signs up. You got to tell people that, that's the only way they're going to know. Have a sign there that also says, you know, city law, city code requires dogs on leash at all times. You know, that kind of thing. People believe that they can do it. They believe it's okay. If you give them a place that they can go where it is okay for the dog to be off leash, that gives them an option. Dewey has figured out how to enforce it. They have a person. They sell permits. The permits probably pay for the person's salary. It's probably a net income driver for Dewey. So there are ways to pay for it. I think we just have to think about that. But I think when you, yeah, and Terry, thank you for saying, I'm a city resident. I have a dog. I want to be able to walk my dog. I walk her on a leash at all times. What's really the difference of the boardwalk and the sidewalks? Granted, you've got bicyclists up there, but bicyclists shouldn't be riding out of control up on the boardwalk. But why should I be penalized because the bicyclists are out of control? I mean, I do think we need some enforcement. In my opinion, you know, the code enforcement should not probably fall to the police department. They have traffic laws. They have other laws to enforce. There needs to be some code enforcement with non-violent and things that aren't going to hurt people. They need to be. You need to have code enforcement for that. You know. You all have, this is not an animal issue thing, but you all always bring up the trash cans on the street. Police departments shouldn't be enforcing those types of rules. Police departments shouldn't be enforcing where a dog can walk, in my opinion. But give the residents a place that they can go with their dogs. And I know this makes it even harder, but at least Monday through Friday. Through the end of June, there's nobody here Monday through Friday. If you can't get behind the weekends, somehow during the week. And, you know, I'm leaving my house at 7 o'clock in the morning with my dog. I'm back home by 8 or 8:30. You know, allow people to walk their dogs on the boardwalk, and maybe not till 10, maybe till 8:30, maybe till 9, you know. The bicyclists are probably out there more between 9 and 10 because you get the kids up, you get them fed, and then you take them out to ride a bike. You know, that kind of thing. But I think there are ways for this to work if you just sort of think outside the box. Thanks.
No one has mentioned the poop problem on the boardwalk. I have been walking all winter on the boardwalk. I never make it down and back without seeing a huge smear where people have walked in it. I see it on the sides. And if you have the number of dogs that we have in the summertime, and you allow them on the boardwalk, I don't care if it's for 2 hours, you can just imagine how much poop there will be that's not picked up. I don't care how many bags you put out. The guy who doesn't carry a bag is also the guy who won't walk to the bag dispenser. If you've been around dog people and dogs, as long as I have, that very person doesn't care about whether he'll look around. In fact, he may have a bag. He only picks it up if someone's watching. And they're not going to, the policemen are never going to enforce the poop on the boardwalk problem. And it's bad enough in the wintertime when we don't have any dogs. I mean, it's not bad, it's just that you better look out. But to suggest that could be possible for even 2 hours in the summertime is beyond me. Unless you're going to have a poop patrol of some sort that can, handle the excess, shall we say.
Liza Hodgkins again, Forgotten Mile. So yes, I'm not a resident, and I do totally get that you should go by what the residents want. So I want to be a resident at one point, so we'll see what happens with that. But I just want to say I agree with a lot of her the statement that she made. I did miss the question about why you won't have somebody, because in what I read on the webpage yesterday, that was, I thought, a proposal to hire somebody at $16 an hour to be a dog ambassador. And I also think that people are more apt to want to apply for that kind of job than they might for a police job. So just because you don't have policemen, I mean, it's a different category. You're not going to get shot probably talking people about poop. But as I said, I've taken my dogs to Dewey for decades, and here as well, but not on the boardwalk. And I really don't see that much poop on the beach. I think there's a lot of other people who kind of watch out for that, but I don't walk it every day, as I'm sure she does. So I can't say she doesn't have a good point. But I think a lot of it is other people also commenting on it. Definitely you do have to have signs, because if people don't know, then they have no excuse. If they read something online that says Poodle Beach is a great place, they're not necessarily going to check the laws. But the other part of it is, besides signs, is marketing. Every place, such as mine, that allows dogs should have it very clear that they show to their customers what the laws are. So if you have it at Deauville, the people who go somewhere else, there's always going to be people who ignore everything and are jerks, washing their dog and then being nasty about it. So maybe the one question is, so are you not looking for a dog ambassador in Rehoboth now?
That's Dewey.
Okay, so what you had quoted was just the Dewey site. I guess I just skimmed it.
That's what Dewey has.
So is there a reason you're not considering that here, a dog ambassador? And also, I would say I paid for my dogs for a lifetime, which is $35 at Dewey. That's not paying for anybody's salary, I know. But the person who I met once, who was their dog ambassador, was wonderful, and she just loves dogs and liked telling people, and she showed she was a great representative of Dewey Beach. And I think if you get the right person here, which I would think you could, would also be great for Rehoboth. But it's really marketing. It's putting it on your websites, obviously. It's really telling all people like me, this is the rules. I can't control my tenants, but I think most people, and I know most of them, are really pay attention to that. So anyway, maybe would you consider having a dog ambassador here? I would do it, but it's too early in the morning for me.
Does anyone take their dogs up to North Shores, to the state park? That's where I take my dog. You get there in the morning before parking, and it's pretty busy.
You can go there year-round.
Yeah, year-round with dogs. So
Time of the day.
yeah, and it's not that much further from Deauville.
Yeah, but you're going to have to buy a permit to get in there.
Right.
Dave Diefendorfer, city resident again. I'm not a big fan of me personally letting our dogs off leash. We just don't do it. Our dogs have been attacked before where we lived up north several times, and I'm not a big fan of dogs off leash. I get some people are, and it's awful what these people have to live with these dogs running loose. I can't stand loose dogs, but I do agree. If you want to try something up in Deauville, up an area, might be a good idea. You might just want to think about the times. I wouldn't let it go past 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or whatever. You got to think about the times, because there's people up there starting to use the beach. But I think it's a great idea just to get them away, to get them out of the city, and let people run their dogs if they want to. Thank you.
I think what we discussed was sunrise until 8 a.m. at Deauville Beach. And one of the issues with the Board of Commissioners was how are we going to mark it off? And because then that goes into the enforcement issue. And I think based upon what the Beach and Boardwalk Committee has discussed and what we've discussed here, they're not against having a place for dogs. It's just we have to figure out how we're going to enforce it. And I don't know if, I certainly don't have the answer. And I don't know if anyone does. And I don't know what the signs should say. I mean, you guys also don't want to have these big, no dog, I don't know what our sign should say or how because there are signs that say no dog. Obviously, it's probably the fifth thing of the small print on the signs on the boardwalk. But how do we go about letting people know that is not a dog beach? Do you have any thoughts of what kind of signage you would want or where you would want it?
Well, I think our communications director is probably the one to ask that question, because there's a lot of different ways you could do it. The signage is a big one. And as you mentioned, you go up to Gordon's Pond, which is dog free for all. I mean, so I think one of the things the signs can do is offer people alternatives. It's like they've heard, they've heard that this is, or they've been going to Poodle Beach to walk their dog. It's like, well, where do I go? So tell them where they can go legally. Give them a heads up on that. And you know, it doesn't have to be a huge sign, but it could be, I mean, I think people are going to read it. You know, if you put it in the right place, they're going to read the details, and you can give them those details. Plus, you can get on social media, and just, you can get the word out, you know, and I think it's a kind of a social thing, too. These people know each other. I mean, they get out of their cars and they know each other's dogs and their kids and stuff. And so I think once the party moves to Deauville Beach or someplace else, that it kind of takes care of itself. I'm looking for ways of directing people without having to have a police officer there. You know what I mean? It's kind of getting the preponderance of the problem solved, as opposed to like enforcement down to the nitty gritty. There's always going to be people who break the rules. And maybe before you get to the point where you hire a specific officer or somebody, you can just try to move the bulk of people someplace where it is controlled, and do it that way. You know, do it gently first and see if that works. I mean, it doesn't really cost anything. That's all.
A couple of the commissioners on a sidebar had mentioned to me, had we considered areas outside of the beach, meaning the schoolyard, for instance. I think some people take their dogs to Rehoboth Beach Elementary, is it?
Could I speak up for a second?
Sure.
I don't think the people who use Deauville Beach will be very happy, number one. Number two, Terry, you speak for residents as if all residents have dogs and all residents want their dogs on the beach. So if we were going to speak for residents, we would have to have a referendum or something to find out what all residents want. If I had a child in elementary school, I would not want dogs there, because even when you clean up, there is residue. So when my kids go out there, I wouldn't like it. Those are a few little tidbits.
I don't speak for the residents. I'm speaking for myself as a resident. And I'm reading the mission statement of Rehoboth Beach is what I'm referring to. And I just Googled, where is the dog beach in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware? The answer is 1100 South Boardwalk, Poodle Beach, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, and a map on how to get there.
What website is it?
That's on Google. Just a search. Just a search.
Yeah, there's a couple of websites to direct
that's
people
what
there.
people are seeing when they come to town, and that's what they're dealing with. I see it. I was there the day Frank counted 65 dogs going to the bathroom on his yard. It's crazy. I guess I'm pretty black and white as a person, and I try to be common sense. Put a sign there. This is not an ingress egress for dogs. You will be fined. We have set up a place for your dogs, Deauville Beach, and it requires a tag. The tag pays for the enforcement officer, or some of it, and then part of the $35 million budget of the town pays for some of it. Right. Well, Gordon's Pond, that's a state park. We can't do anything with, but you can put that on there.
Just a quick addition about the signs. If you have the scan on the other poster, I mean, you can have a scan on a card if you're on a sign, if you're worried about putting too much information on it.
So where are we on this? So if I hear everybody, it looks like we need to do a better job with enforcement. We would like a sign down near Prospect Street that Poodle Beach is not a dog beach.
Messaging on the website, because your Google sites, you know, they're going to pull information from other sources and vice versa. So when you Google and, you know, one has a definitive match to what you're Googling, you know, chances are the more you look at it, the more sites are going to pick up that information and roll with it. So I think we need to do a better job of messaging on the city website as well, and associated websites where folks go for information, right? They're looking at if they're renting, they're looking at rental company sites, they're looking at the Chamber or Main Street. You know, it's not all about enforcement, it's messaging.
Did you have something?
How would one get removed, Terry, what you just found on a Google map? I mean, how does one go about getting erroneous information taken down?
There are ways to contact Google.
I think it's an algorithm that they use, and that's obviously a very searched term because it pre-filled just when I started. Whereas the Dog Beach and RE, and then boom, the rest of it pre-filled and went right to that. It's taking them right down to the end of Prospect. And then there are some other bullet points saying
We have to
Poodle Beach.
match that messaging on the city website or on wherever we're messaging, social media, anywhere, so that
the city
correct-
map shows where Deauville Beach is. I mean, I would make a motion for the signage, opening Deauville up from sunrise till 8 or whatever, 8:30, and selling tags to help offset the cost of enforcement, and put something about self-enforcement in there.
Yeah, the mayor and I sat in his office, and there were 3 different websites that actually direct people to Poodle Beach. And I'll have to check back with Lynn to find out if we could, they were actually dog owner sites and information similar to what you found. And I'm not sure there's much we can do other than our own enforcement to say that if you've arrived here, you're at the wrong place.
But if you give them an alternative that the city's behind, I think that's, you know, us looking for the people that are visiting, looking out for them. It's looking out for the residents that live in that neighborhood. Just seems to make sense. And the school, you know, Cape Henlopen School District owns that land. I went to school there.
So we had gone on record with the Board of Commissioners that we had asked, as you said, for Deauville Beach for the time. And so it will go on an agenda again to be discussed because the discussion was not finished. So my guess is seeing how things move in the city, it won't happen this season. We might be able to get the recommendation of the Times, May 15th, September 15th done. Hopefully we'll get the poop bag stations done. We've got the flyer done. This is a much bigger issue. It may require us to meet as a group with the Beach and Boardwalk Committee, 2 committees together to discuss this since they somewhat overlap. But you know, you watched the same meeting I did. There wasn't a lot of support for.
It seemed like there was a lot of talk about the boardwalk coming into play, and this
Right.
removes that aspect of it. And it's a smaller area, so it could be monitored. And if you're out of there by 8 in the morning,
Right. And I don't think anyone disagrees with that. It's just, it goes back down again to enforcement. If we're just moving the problem from Prospect to Deauville because we're not enforcing
there's
it.
so much lack of enforcement.
Well, but that's,
Well, I mean, I
that's,
can make a list right now.
no, and that's,
People driving
no
60
secret.
miles an hour up and down Rehoboth Avenue
Yeah.
every morning.
yep. No, nobody will argue with you on that. Any additional comments from the public before we close this out? Are there any member comments, committee member comments?
Have we ever taken a vote, or we're not? We just discussed?
What would you like a vote on?
Or are you proposing to go back to the commissioners proposing Deauville Beach?
No, we've already done that.
Oh.
We've already done that. I think what I would ask the city manager is, could we get signage at Prospect, if we all agree with that, to direct people away from there? I don't think we need to vote on that. Or is there anyone who doesn't agree that we should have signage?
No, I think that's good.
So I'll ask the city manager on that. No, Marcia, at the Board of Commissioners, we talked about our recommendation for Deauville Beach, and so that's under consideration still, but needs to go back on an agenda. Again, whether it goes on a workshop or a city meeting, a commissioners meeting. No member comments? Thanks, everybody. Sure.
Carolyn Diefendorfer, city resident. I guess my one question is is there a way to get a question added to, like, so they're not going to approve Deauville for the summer, but is there a way to get a question added to, say, the election in August, to say, would you be supportive of dogs on the beach in the area of Deauville? Yes or no? Because then we could find out if, the voters, the taxpayers, are supportive or not. I mean, I don't know what's involved with getting questions added.
Yeah,
But
I
it
think
might
that would have to
be
be a
something.
referendum, but I don't think we would do that. But I do know, Lynn, we do have the ability to survey the
Do a
residents.
survey? Okay.
And if we think that's something we'd like to do,
I think it can't hurt.
yeah.
But would we be pitting one side of the city against the other? Are the people in the north going to say, no, we don't want it here, put it down at Poodle Beach? Everybody on the south is going to say, no, I don't want it at Poodle Beach, put it up at Deauville.
Yeah, no, I've already heard from Deauville people that they don't want it there. So
I understand.
Yeah, so nobody, it's not my backyard, nobody wants it in their backyard.
It's not their front yard either. There's nobody that lives on Deauville
But
Beach.
who wants to sit on the beach where dogs have been? Any beach.
In it,
Yes, I can assure you, Marcia, that hundreds of dogs pee and poop on Poodle Beach, and in the afternoon, we have cast of lots and lots of people. It's a very popular beach. On a weekend, Saturdays and Sundays
jammed.
in July and August, I mean, it's mobbed. And talk about Memorial Day, and those big weekends are the weekends we have all the dogs. Now, our problem is we're a little tiny street. So you take these little tiny streets, we're not enough of us to even vote. And that's how it's all happened to us, because nobody cared about us for, my
Right.
parents have been there since 79. Nobody cared about our end of the beach. We never see the police department ever, unless somebody's died or something. But that, I agree with you. The people in the north are going to say, no, I want it on the south, people on the south. But they've got a parking lot, and it's safe up there. And they've got restrooms or porta potties, whatever they are. And it is containable. So it makes it's a much better place and much safer with all of our bicycles and kids coming and going on Price. They ride their bikes right down the middle of the street. Of course they do. And then we have cars turning in who are going to unload dogs. We have actually had someone in a pickup truck open his window. He slows as he hits Prospect, the corner, and he lets his dog jump out of the window and gallop to the beach. I mean, you see things like this all the time. And that's what no one understands who doesn't live on these 2 or 3 streets. Because they come down once a day or something, and maybe they see a little bit, but they just don't see it hour after hour. And the poo and the pee on the beach is significant, with hundreds and hundreds of people, tourists in the afternoon. So, a thought.
so it is a state law that dogs must be leashed at all times, even on the beach. And that was the other issue the Beach and Boardwalk Committee had, is if we did open up the beach, are we going to still require the dogs be leashed? So it's just something to think about. Yes.
I assume you're working a lot with Dewey, and so what has Dewey said are the biggest problems? Because obviously they've had it for a long time. They seem to think it's worth having. I do know a lot of people come here so that they can take their dogs out on the beach. So I think Dewey would give you a lot of information. What have they said that they don't like?
We're not working formally with Dewey on this. We looked at their websites, and we've had our members traveling today had contacted someone in Dewey and asked them how it worked. And theirs all comes down to enforcement. They actually have a person whose job every day is to be on the little gator and patrolling that part of their beach to make sure the dogs have tags, the dogs are permitted, and they stay within the confined area. If we had that, I think we'd be further ahead. But I think we have to crawl before we walk and figure out the enforcement issue. And then we need to say, if we find a place in the city where we think it makes sense, Deauville Beach, the mayor was concerned, how do we mark that off? Because I give you 10 feet, 10 feet becomes 20, how do we prevent the spread? So we need to figure out the enforcement piece. So I don't think we're against it. The Beach and Boardwalk Committee is not against it. It's just trying to figure out how we're going to manage it.
So 2 quick comments. I was a member of Arlington Dogs in Arlington, Virginia. I also worked for the county board in Arlington for 11 years. And we had dog parks that weren't necessarily all completely enclosed. They'd be in a park. And there would be signs on the official outskirts saying, it's only in here. And I would say they were pretty well paid attention to. Not everybody, of course. But you don't have to have a barrier necessarily to stop dogs. The other thing, we've owned our house for 9 years, but I've been coming here for a long time. I've taken my dogs to the beach thousands of times, I would probably say. I have seen that person once. I think it's pretty new that they had that dog ambassador. I've hardly ever seen anybody watching people on the beach, literally once, and that's at one time that I talked to her. So they don't have a lot of enforcement. If they have, it's pretty recent, but I've certainly never seen it, and yet people are still pretty well behaved there. So I don't think your rule, you have to rely on somebody. It's helpful, and I think it's always good to know that someone could be there and check on you, but you don't have to have somebody there all the time. And it certainly hasn't been there, again, one time in thousands of visits.
Thank you. Frank? This is the world's longest animal issues committee meeting.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You had mentioned
For once,
you mentioned you take your dog to Gordon's Pond. And what are the rules there? And how do they manage that?
So I don't know if there were, I do know that Delaware, as a state, there's leash law for every area. I go there in the morning before the parking starts. So in the summer, you don't necessarily need a permit if you get in and get out, probably before 8 o'clock. And I have a little dog who's on a leash, but I do unhook him a little bit and he'll go in the water, but he can, he walks about 10 inches. He's an old 22-year-old dog. So, but there are people that have their dogs running around and they're there every morning. And so I just wonder why people aren't going up there. Now, during the day, yes, you'd have to have a permit, which I think is $70-some for the month, or for the season. Or you buy, I think it's $10 to get in a daily pass.
And it's cheaper
But
for
you could bring your
seniors, too,
dogs. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I asked was that, the DeVille Beach thing is going to be a long, drawn-out, contentious process. I mean, that's not a done deal. Gordon's Pond's a done deal.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that if the city tried to direct people there, no permits, plenty of parking, there is an option. In other words, there's a legal option here. And so that if you Googled it, where do you take your dog in Rehoboth Beach? It was like at the end of Surf Avenue, Gordon's Pond State Park. It would, if we move towards that, it would kind of an easy and no cost, no fight answer. Just let's just direct people somewhere else by signage and social media content. I'm sure that our city communications people kind of know how to handle that. I mean, you know what I mean? That's what they're paid to do. So we already have that in place. And I think we should just leverage that and try to get them up to Gordon's Pond. At least a bunch of them, half of them would be helpful. Anything. Thank you.
Any other comments? No. Well, thank you all for your time, and thanks for your comments. It was helpful. I know this is an ongoing issue, so I appreciate everybody's input. And I'll let you know, I'll send a note out to the committee when it's on the agenda again next, and if some of you want to attend that meeting with the Board of Commissioners and give your input, that would be helpful. So we'll call this.
Are we going to discuss new business, or?
Sure.
Okay, so items to include on future agendas. This is a long meeting. I'll make this super quick, and I don't think it will be a highly contested or lengthy discussion. So came to my attention on Saturday evening during the weather that we had that there was a dog that was lost, I think somewhere maybe on Lake Avenue. And some folks had found it, and it eventually ended up being tracked down that, folks were staying, I think, at the Breakers, and the dog had gotten out. And in the discussions back and forth, to quickly reunite this animal that was obviously lost during a storm, it was there was no quick and easy way to scan the dog. The veterinarians were closed. It was 9 p.m. Obviously, this dog hadn't gone far. And, obviously, I think we all know the drill is to call animal services, wait for the animal services officers to come, scan the dog, and hopefully reunite. Thankfully, some calls were made and the dog was located. However, in the discussions, the quick and easy solution to this, and when there are dogs that go missing in city limits, and we have police officers and even just citizens that are concerned about reuniting this dog as quickly as possible, is to locate a microchip scanner. During business hours, it's great to be able to take that animal to a veterinarian. Outside of business hours, it's a little bit challenging. Doing some research, I'm going to throw this out there for 2 avenues of further discussion. The town of Dewey Beach does have a microchip scanner. It's new as of January. And I also looked into pricing a microchip scanner that could be kept on site, whether it's with Rehoboth PD or with emergency services, however that works. There are different styles, different techniques. The most complicated one that would be able to scan a dog from a distance, let's say, dog scared and reacting, was around $400. My recommendation, it saves time, it's going to save resources, that if we can have a dog reunited quicker to its owner without having to take police out of their role to engage with animal services, save animal services the time and energy, regardless of the circumstances. And it's also, I think, a benefit for the city to have something like that. So I'd like to bring that up maybe for a meeting in the future,
Okay.
and for consideration.
Okay. I think that's good. For our next meeting, I know that this committee has not usually met during the summer season. Is there any thought about how often you guys want to meet, frequency of meetings?
Well, we haven't met in the summer because there's no parking, and we can't park in the parking lot
Right.
unless you can get us passes to park in the parking lot.
I think we could during the meeting, if we want to have summer meetings, we should be able to get you passes to park. If you're here actually on city business. Or do we want to have meetings when it's topical and we need to discuss something?
I think the further we take time away from these conversations, the more we have to restart them, because we did, in former meetings with Commissioner Byrne, we did a lot of work on the waste bag dispensers. We had gotten pricing, we had talked about disposal, and obviously things changed with the avenues and the suggestions of where we would put them and the whole process. But I think we, just for the benefit of us as a committee, but also for the benefit of the residents of Rehoboth, that we don't have to keep reinventing the wheel every time. So, things don't stop in the summertime just because we're busy. And if our meetings have to move to a virtual format, for a particular reason in the summertime, I think that's fine. However, I think it would be a disservice to take a step away and then have to, again, go back and reintroduce everything again.
Okay.
I agree with that.
We're all busy, but we have a
Yeah,
responsibility
but
to do this. Yeah.
Squeakiest wheel gets the oil or grease, right?
Yeah, sure.
So I'll check with Ann when she's back, and we'll pick a Tuesday. We'll keep them at Tuesday at 2, if that works with everybody, and we'll find a time in May. And again, I will via email keep you all posted as to what the agenda looks like for discussion on the topics that we covered. So with that, at 3:24, we'll call the meeting of the